Hello everyone, this is lesson 7. In some ways it's the most important lesson in the entire course. Let's look again at our goal. Here you see a picture of a mother loving her child. To be in the garden oneness all day, every day, we need to be as a newborn child. We also need to be as that mother. Now I'm going to ask you a question. As you're looking at the picture, is that mother full of joy and interacting with that child by reasoning, using her reason, or using her intuition? Is spirit working through her reason or through her intuition to guide her to love that child and to nurture that child? If you say intuition, then you agree with Jesus, Buddha, Eve, and Adam. Spirit guides us through our intuition. Then we use reason to implement what we hear through our intuition. So on the way of the soul, people nurture intuition. They learn how to use intuition, and there will be exercises throughout the course in how to do that. Now I want to introduce you to Jesus and his description of the garden experience. Jesus said, "The kingdom, it is of your eye inward, and it is of your eye outward." Now, people for 2,000 years have argued about what Jesus meant by the word kingdom. In the Old Testament, people expected the Messiah to bring a physical kingdom, one that would be worldwide government. And that is in some way still the prevailing view. But notice what Jesus said, the kingdom, it is of your eye inward. It's a way of looking inward, and it is of your eye outward. It's a way of looking outward. In other words, the kingdom for Jesus is the experience. And he's talking about the soul experience. He's talking about the garden experience. So his term for the garden experience is kingdom. And he does that because when we are in the soul experience, we're full of self-confidence. We rule ourselves. We rule our interactions with others. We are powerful beings when we are in the garden or kingdom experience. Now notice he doesn't say it is of your eyes, plural. He says it is of your single eye inward and of your single eye outward. Historically, throughout time, the single eye has been the symbol of our intuition. Let me show you a picture of that. Today, many cultures revere single eye intuitive knowing. So what we're looking at is a picture of a woman with a dot in the center of her forehead symbolizing the single intuitive eye. Then we see a picture of Buddha with a dot on his forehead symbolizing the same thing. To be on the way of the soul, one makes intuitive knowing more important than rational reasoning. That is very difficult for some people to do, because our ego is attached to being in control, and being in control with our minds. To give that up and to make it secondary is very difficult. That's why people meditate. That's why they find different ways of meditating. That's why something called soulfulness it's a way of knowing everything with your soul has taken hold. It's also called mindfulness. but everyone needs to find a way of nurturing their intuition. Now let me show you another page in which we show that Buddha and Jesus also talk about third ear knowing. In other words, we have a single eye, which is also called our third eye. We have a single ear, which is also called our third ear. Over on the left hand, on this page, Jesus said 19 times in the New Testament and in the Gospel of Thomas, it is said 19 times. Sometimes, most of the time, he said it. He who has his ear to listen, let him listen. Now, that single poem is repeated 4 times more than any other saying of Jesus. In other words, his entire way that he was teaching, his gospel of God that he was teaching, his way of knowing God's will in every thought and action is through single eye and single ear knowing. If you ask anybody, a Christian today, what was Jesus' core message, they probably will say something like it was love. His core message was to sacrifice for others. But you don't hear people saying it was to develop your third ear, to develop your listening, your intuitive listening. Yet that was the core of Jesus' message, the core. But theologians and clerics do not emphasize that. I've never heard a cleric get up in a sermon and say, my purpose here today is to teach you how to use your ear to listen. But yet that's what Jesus was teaching. Everything he was doing was to teach how to people to third eye see and third ear listen. Buddha said on the right side, wakefulness is the way to life. By wakefulness, he means intuitive knowing. The fool sleeps as if he were already dead, but the master is awake and he lives forever. You know you live forever through your intuition. To live forever is a metaphor for being in the moment and one with all. When we're in our head, we are divided from all. Below it says, so awake, reflect, watch, work with care and attention. Live on the way, and he's talking about the way of the soul, and the light will grow in you. Don't live on the way of the mind, live on the way of the soul, and the light will grow in you. That's what we're teaching through these lessons, and we're using their words. Now, let me summarize it with this image. The way of the soul consists of single eye, intuitive knowing, and single ear, intuitive knowing. We're single, one with ourselves. We're one with others. We have no anxiety, worry, or depression. When we're in intuitive knowing, we're in mental health and spiritual health. When we're using our 2 eyes and our 2 ears, we're watching what's going on around us, and we're either conforming or trying to manipulate what's going on around us. So we're using 2 eyes and 2 ears. Single eye and single ear is what a baby uses, what that mother is using. They're solely listening primarily to inspiration coming through their soul and being guided by that, and then using their mind to control their behavior and their thoughts. Let me summarize the way of the mind with this image. You notice the single eye at the top of this pyramid. Below, you notice levels of knowing. That's what those are. The more blocks that you see in the pyramid means the more false ways that we are knowing ourselves and presenting ourselves to the world. So we begin with no blocks. A baby has no false self. But gradually it learns not to be itself and to put on and to meet the expectations of others. As it continues to do that, it builds more and more blocks from being itself. The child becomes more divided until they become an adult and they can hardly remember what it means to have the soul experience. So the way of the soul is on the left side, removing those blocks. The way of the mind is on the right side, adding blocks. So the more we become divided from ourselves and others, the greater we feel anxiety, worry, and depression. Now, what I'd like to show you is summarize the two ways we have to know. Now, I know this is a lot of information, and you may have to stop and pause and reflect on it. We have two ways of knowing. The way of the soul is one way. It consists of being single, one with yourself and one with spirit. One eye and ear empowered by one soul. One is in the garden, in the kingdom. Abraham called it the promised land. Promised land is not a physical land. It's a metaphor for the Garden of Eden and for the kingdom. Buddha called it the soul experience, nirvana. Soul intuitive knowing primarily, mind knowing secondarily. Okay, on the way of the mind, instead of experiencing singleness with yourself and with others, we experience division within ourselves. One eye is on the expectations of others. The other eye is on oneself to see if we are conforming to those expectations. If we are a false self in a world of darkness, division, and endless worry, mind knowing, and with our mind knowing only. So those are the two ways of knowing. One is the soul way, the other was the mind way. Now let's summarize the methodology. The way of the soul knowing methodology is natural to a baby, and it becomes more natural to people as they grow on the way of the soul. You first experience people and things. A baby experiences. Then a person on the way of the soul challenges everyone's beliefs about those people and things. A person on the way of the soul is continually changing. Their beliefs continually change. They don't have steadfast faith. They're growing. They're letting spirit lead them deeper and deeper into the soul experience. They challenge one's previous beliefs about those people and things. So every belief that we have can be challenged and should be challenged. We use third eye and ear intuition to reveal new information about these people and things. You've seen artists like Van Gogh who looks at a field and doesn't see a field like we see it. It sees it full of colors, dynamic, radiant. He is using his intuitive third eye to see that field, and then he paints it. That can happen also with us when we look at ourselves with our third eye. We can see new things in ourselves. We can see the obstacles that we're putting in our life, preventing us from being fulfilled. We can lose our third eye also to see the darkness and the light in other people. We can't reason to darken light in other people very easily. It's much more easier to intuit that, and then to use our reason to figure out what we're intuiting. Once we intuit something new, we form tentative beliefs about what we've seen. So that would be a way of the soul, the way we proceed. We challenge our current beliefs. We open to spirit to see things with our third eye and third ear differently. We form tentative beliefs. We act on those beliefs, and then we repeat. So it's always being in motion. It's always giving up what you believe in order to believe differently. Spirit is always trying to remove our lower level false selves and our blocks and our beliefs and present to us higher levels of truth and love. On the right side, we say way of the mind knowing methodology, which is unnatural and harmful to the baby in us. It starts with listening to the beliefs of others about people and things. In other words, religions, whether it's institutional theological religions or social religions, want us to believe certain ways about how to think and act. Number two, we blindly believe the beliefs of other people. So we begin by listening to other people and then blindly believing what they say. We act on those beliefs. We then defend and promote those blind beliefs, even if it means distorting facts, inventing facts, and ignoring facts. So on the way of the mind, one listens to others, one adopts beliefs, one defends those beliefs, but he's not on the way of the soul unless he's continually challenging his beliefs and continually evolving in his belief system. I want to show you what Jesus, one of the most important statements that Jesus makes about discovering yourself. Jesus said, whoever is the one who discovers himself on his own, the world is worthy of him not. In other words, if a person is living his life unconsciously living the beliefs of the world, his parents, his church, his political party, his professors, he's not discovering himself on his own. And that is a person who's living on the way of the mind, on the way of darkness. And Jesus said, the world is worthy of him not. On the right, the world says, whoever is the one who does not conform to official blind beliefs, he is a bad person and deserving of punishment. So the world punishes people who do not conform. So to be on the way of the mind, one will run into tremendous resistance because you're always changing, you're always growing, you're always developing new beliefs, you're challenging society, you're challenging yourself, and you're discovering yourself on your own. So on the way of the soul, a person becomes an individual, becomes independent of everyone and every institution. That's why a person on the way of the soul is a threat, and that's why Jesus was murdered. He was a threat to Roman authority, he was a threat to Jewish authorities, he was a threat to society in general, because he was leading people out of conformity and into being themselves. All right, now to make this more practical, I made up a lot of statements that you might make say to a child. I'm going to read two parallel statements. And I want you to decide which one is made by somebody on the way of the soul and which one is made by somebody on the way of the mind. Okay, on one side, this is a parent talking to a child. You are wonderful. Do not throw your food on the floor. On the other one, you are a bad boy because you threw your food on the floor. Now, which one is from a person on the way of the mind and which one is from a person on the way of the soul? Notice that the parent on the way of the soul starts off by saying, "You're wonderful." He's affirming, that parent is affirming the divinity, the divine life in the child. Then the parent corrects the child. Let me give you a second example. Do you experience the presence of a great spirit that loves and helps you? That's a parent asking the child, empowering the child to reflect on whether they listen to spirit or not. On the right side is a parent who says, for you it's on the left side, okay. "You are a good girl because you believe in a great spirit that loves and helps you." Okay. So one asks the child, "Do you recognize the spirit?" The other one tries to indoctrinate the child into thinking that they're good when they recognize spirit. One is on the way of the soul, the other one is on the way of the mind. Here's a third statement. When you hurt another, don't you sense that you cause harm to yourself and to the other person? That's one parent. The other parent says, "You are a bad boy when you cause harm to another person." So when we label someone as bad or good, we're beginning to indoctrinate them on the way of the mind. We're showing them, these are the rules. If you want to be accepted by society, accepted by us, this is what you've got to do. The other parent is saying, reflect. Do you realize that hurting another person is also hurting yourself? They want the child to discover himself on his own. All right, here's another example. "I must make you stay in your room when you are causing harm to another person." That's one parent. The other parent says, "I must punish you because you are bad when you cause harm to another person." One uses the word punish, the other one just says, this is the discipline. It's a way of thinking. One is trying to empower the child to recognize the consequences of his action, and the other one is trying to force conformity. Here's another one. "You helped her and she is so grateful." That's one parent. The other parent says, "You are a good girl when you helped her." When we start telling people that they're good or bad, when they conform to what we want, we're indoctrinating them. We're putting them on the way of the mind. We want them to blindly believe us. The first parent, "You helped her and she is so grateful," was a statement that simply stated the facts and let the child decide how to proceed. And finally, we have a statement from one parent that says, "You are perfect and you always will be." Now, I don't recall my parents ever saying that to me. "You are perfect and you always will be." The other parent says, "You are born bad with an original sin." So in multiple religions, a child is told that they are born with an original sin and they were born bad. Can you imagine the impact that has on the child? As opposed to the parent who says, "You are born perfect and you always will be." So I'm trying to give you examples of the way of how people think on the way of the soul and on the way of the mind. Here's an image of that. Healthy discipline. The parent is continually saying to the child, "You are essentially wonderful and you need to see that in everyone in the world." So a parent is continually wanting that child to own themselves as divine. Unhealthy religious discipline. You need to be many false selves, each based on a belief about being essentially good or bad. That's the core of religion, whether it's secular religion or theological religion, is that you need to be false in order to be accepted as good or bad. So that is the end of Lesson 7. It's based on helping you to know the difference between using intuition primarily and secondarily your mind to know other people, to know yourself, and to determine how to grow on the way of the soul. If you enjoyed this lesson, click on like below, leave your comments and leave your questions. I will answer them by email if you've registered on my site, 7771.org. Thank you for listening and have a good day. I'll see you on Lesson 8.